Welcome back to Avenues of Awakening. And today we're going to start to take a look at some of the modalities of healing and integration. And so what I wanted to start with is dream work. A lot of what's been coming up for me in the last couple of months is the recognition of unconscious patterns or old ways of being that just don't seem to work for me anymore. During these times, it's pretty normal for dreams to become more active. With that in mind, we're going to have a conversation with a longtime friend of mine, Carrie Fields, who's very gifted in what I would call the numinous realms. And she's trained in dream work as well as art therapy, hypnosis, and originally clinical social work. So let's go ahead and talk with Carrie, and let's just jump into some dream work.
Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I think dreams are such an incredible gateway to the inner realms where we can actually communicate with the aspects of our being that are like not always easy to access and that want to come up in these interesting ways in like our healing process. And I mean, I just think it sounds like it could potentially be a really fruitful avenue for you to explore in what you're describing.
A lot of the path forward for me, as I mentioned in my email to you, was like trying to intuitively find the right next kind of key or doorway to explore. And so like getting into, dream work, I kind of realized I really didn't know much about it. I've had a history, we all dream, and I've had a sort of instinctive interest in kind of grouping the kinds of dreams and stuff. But I realized like I actually really didn't know what it means or is entailed. So like, can you tell me what do you think about what is dream work,
Oh yeah.
In 2 sentences.
It's like everything. Yeah, I mean, I had an interest in dreams my whole life and I've always paid attention to my dreams, and that's a whole story I could tell you about, but then when I started actually studying dream work and all the different approaches and philosophies there are about dreams, it was just, wow, like there's so much to learn and there's so many different avenues, and I see it as a portal to this other realm, which is, we call it the unconscious in Western psychology, and I use that word a lot, but I don't know that, like, that's not the only word that you can use, but it's also the collective unconscious, the Akashic field, the inner being, access points to communication with other beings, other dimensions. There's just so much there that's available. But there's also on a personal level, just so much rich resourcing and content to work with our own material, as, who we are in this life. And to me, it's just, dreams are a gateway to many, many different things. And there are many ways to work with them. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I'm interested in all of them.
Okay. You should do a whole podcast series on dreams then. I mean, like, I just did one on a brief history of Western medicine. I mean, that's an entire podcast. You could make 200 episodes on this, So we've all had dreams. I'm sure we've all shared dreams with each other and with our friends and family. But my background with dreams was about even being a psychology major background. Freud's book on dreams, and then I knew a little bit about Carl Jung, and then that was about it. And then there's occasional like armchair dream interpretation, right? Now I got my third guy that I mentioned, Robert Johnson, who's I guess pretty well known in this. Whom I had not even heard of. I'm like, oh gosh. So I'm sure there's all these people, all this work out here. So take us from like the difference between what we might be doing in an armchair. Like, oh yeah, I had a dream about, a truck that was coming through the fog. And they say, oh yeah, that sounds fun. As I'm like reading this, I'm really understanding there's really a lot more to this than kind of what I had discovered to date on my own. It's more robust.
Well, I guess first I'll say that one of the things that people say about dreams that I think is true is that they're overdetermined, which is a word I didn't know what that meant until I was learning about dream work. And it's a dream has so many layers of meaning, and there's so much content packed into the dream on numerous levels that the same dream, you could read it, it could have many, many different messages and many different dimensions to how you can read and work with that dream. So it could be simultaneously a commentary on one's daily life experience and also a very spiritual dream or and then you could have many different possibilities of how that dream comes through to you content-wise and what it might mean. To me, it's almost kaleidoscopic. Like you could enter any piece of that dream, any image, any aspect of it, and then kind of unpack it and expand it in infinite directions, which might be also true of this reality. But
Right.
So I think there's value in every single way of working with a dream. But what we sometimes get tripped up on, especially in our kind of cultural training or experience, and the emphasis on Western rationalism is that our conscious mind or our rational mind wants to understand and interpret the dream based on the conscious mind's perspective, which is very limited. And I would say the unconscious mind's perspective is much more expansive. And so it's like we can want to say, this means this means this, this means this. And while that may be totally true on one level, it kind of cuts off the opportunity to ask, well, and what else? And how can I open that up even more and experience something that, was unexpected? Like dreams always show us things that our conscious minds aren't aware of. And so if our conscious mind thinks it figured it out, it often will shut down that spirit of inquiry. And so I'm really a fan of approaches that help us go past the rational mind and access a dream through the right brain, what you would call the right brain, or the kind of
intuitive,
the body
kind of
or the intuition or our creative mind or imagination. Those aspects help us to, I think, deepen into the experience of the dream. But what's cool is that you could also pick up a dream dictionary, which, a lot of people, that's as far as they'll go. And you probably will get something out of that, So it's not wrong. It's just not the whole picture.
So how did you move from that level into greater understanding, and kind of what was the path?
I started becoming interested in dreams when I was 10, or probably younger than that. I was always interested, but somehow when I was really young, I found out about Freud's book about dreams. And it's not like I read it or anything, but I was telling people that I wanted to be a dream interpreter or a dream analyst.
Really?
So I found out that existed somehow. And then
that's incredible.
I don't know where that came from, but I've kind of held that as a key for my life, because if I knew that somehow at age 10, then I believe in kind of the things we were really interested in as a child, and as a child are important keys to our soul essence. But anyway, so I did my my 6th grade science project on lucid dreaming, and I was really interested in it, and I wrote down my dreams starting at age 10 for almost my whole life, but never really knew how to work with them.
Yeah.
I guess fast forward, I ended up going into social work, and really I think because my interest in this sort of the psyche, and helping people and learning about people. But I felt really unsatisfied with that approach for myself, because I think social work is very practical. It's very focused on basic needs and addressing what's immediately kind of the immediate concrete problems in people's lives, which is incredibly important. But for me, it didn't meet my hunger for I was well, what about the unconscious? I really just wanted to learn about the mystery of the unconscious, and we didn't really talk about that at all. And so I was doing more community mental health stuff for a while and really burning myself out. I had severe chronic fatigue, And I eventually got to a point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. And so I quit my job. And this was when we were living in New Mexico. And I was spending a lot of time just by myself, just kind of wondering what to do with myself and like really, really longing for this, like, how can I feel like I can live more authentically with who I really am? And I was also wondering a lot about the nature of reality, which I always am, but what we're really doing here and who I really am. And I guess because I kind of had hit not a rock bottom, but kind of like just a wall with like, I can't keep doing what I'm doing. It wasn't until that point that I kind of surrendered and was able to be like, well, what do I really want to learn about? You know, like, what do I really want to do? And it was like, well, I want to learn about dreams. I've always wanted to do that. So I think the first book I read that Robert Johnson book that you're reading.
Inner Work by Robert A. Johnson.
And
I'm loving it.
That was a great introduction, and it's so accessible and it gives you some really useful techniques. So those were the first things I played around with, I think. And then I also read a book I heard a podcast interview with Edward Bruce Bynum, who is a dream worker. And he wrote a book called, it's called The Dreamlife of Families. And it's about how dreams are shared amongst families. And he's an amazing person and just his work is amazing. But that book really inspired me and just opened my mind that there can be a lot more here than just even just the psychological component, you know, that sort of ancestral component of dreams. Yeah, I just kind of kept opening the doors from there. And then I found IASD, the International Association for the Study of Dreams. That was really like the gateway for me, was IASD. And if anyone's interested in dreams, I would recommend joining that organization. They have some pretty accessible online courses that I took that kind of give you a broad introduction to different dreamwork techniques. And it's just a good way to kind of connect in to the international dreamwork community, which is, there are so many people out there working with dreams, but it's kind of a niche, obscure thing in a way. So like, I didn't at first know how to tap into that. So that organization is really awesome. I've been to their conference a couple times, and it's just exposed me to a lot of different ideas and approaches. And then also through that organization, I ended up meeting some people just through like these chat forums where we ended up forming our own dream group for a little while. And I met two individuals who I started dream exchange partnerships with, one of whom I still work with. And we meet every week and kind of back and forth, like just do dream work with each other's dreams. And that's a really good way to get into dream work because I don't know, there's more I could say about that, but working with other people and having a mirror and a reflection partner can be extremely helpful rather than trying to go it all on our own. So, and then I ended up starting my own dream group during COVID, and I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was reading Jeremy Taylor's book, who is someone, like if I was to say one introductory book on dreamwork for me that I would recommend would be Jeremy Taylor's The Wisdom of Your Dream.
Wisdom of Your Dreams. Okay.
Yeah, that book gave me a lot of inspiration and ideas. And I started a dream group and met with them for about a year and a half on Zoom over the pandemic. And just from there have done lots of different trainings and classes and read a lot of books and practiced a lot of things. And it's just kind of expanded out from there. And to me, I just really love exploring all these different possibilities of ways to work with dreams and trying different techniques because it puts together more of a patchwork of perspectives that I can expand into like I don't know, I really love expanding my perspective.
What is the experience to you of participating in these dream groups? Because like it helps so many times in the areas we're interested in or in healing to find people with sort of a similar like mind or intention or ways of reflecting. Mm-hmm. So kind of how would you relate your dream work to sort of how that helps along your inner process? Kind of what do you get out of it, or how does it leave you feeling and fulfilled and all that kind of thing? Yeah, doing this kind of work, especially with groups. Mm-hmm.
I've been a participant and a leader in several dream groups. So I've gotten kind of a variety of experiences there. But if the space is held well and there's a good container and there's, we're all able to respect and honor each other's autonomy around our, because it's really vulnerable content. So I think it's important to set up a good container. As long as that's there, I think it's an extraordinary growth experience, and it creates a level of intimacy that's very different than relating just on the level of the conscious mind, because we're really relating to these, deeper aspects of ourselves and parts of ourselves that we might not show in other contexts. And also just getting that feedback. And I think that in many traditions too around the world, like we have dream work traditions in Western psychology, but dream practice has been an aspect of many, many traditional cultures, probably as long as humans have had
dreams
around,
Yeah.
And it has had such a huge role in ancient history and prophetic dreams and oracular dreams. And anyway, so in many cultures, there's a practice of sharing one's dream, like with the community, and dreaming for the community and dreaming for the tribe. And so I think it brings us back to, like, in a way, our roots of being an authentic community with other human beings, on where we're like encountering each other on a soul level. And it's really, I think it's a really special thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I probably would have been too scared to join one of those, because it is very vulnerable, as you mentioned, but if I could see, like, getting to a point where I could do that, but also, like, I don't know, there's a lot of shifts taking place, and I can really see the value of that. It sounds pretty incredible. And then that's probably a little different than a dream exchange partnership, where that's just one-on-one, right? With somebody else. Okay.
And I also think that's a really wonderful way to work with dreams, because some people would say that, I don't know the right person to quote here, it might be Jeremy Taylor, but like, we are uniquely blind to the contents of our own unconscious. And so there's things we'll miss because our conscious minds have all these filters that are, I don't know, that's not the right way to say it, but we have filters, and sometimes the reflection of another person can help us get past those filters.
Yeah, they'll pick up on stuff,
especially
right?
when it's delivered in a way that's compassionate. And a lot of times what we do in dream groups, when there is projection that's going on, and not all dream practices use projection, where in certain dream practices you might just be asking questions and that's it, or working with dreams on each person is working with their own content, but when there's projection, the general rule is to use the words, if it were my dream, and really look at the dream as if it were your own, and share how it lands in your system. And that may or may not resonate with the dreamer, but the dreamer can receive that, and it might open something for them. Or it might be a perspective taking exercise where we get to see our own through a different filter, our own life experience. And so I think that projection can be useful, but I do think it needs to be approached carefully.
Yeah. Let's take a short break. We'll be back in 30 seconds. Carrie has offered to share her dream with us that she experienced several years ago when she was in a major life transition.
This is my octopus dream. I can share this dream, and it's I made a diorama of it.
Wow. Incredible.
And one of the ways I really like to work with dreams is through art. I know we're not on video, like, for the podcast, but I pulled out a bunch of collages I made about different dreams. In this dream, I'm inside of a watery realm that feels kind of like a cave, like spelunking in this sort of watery cave. And there's a sense that like I'm in the center of it. And I feel like I kind of know where I am. I'm home in the center of this watery cave. But I begin to sort of venture out into these kind of side channels and exploring and following different pathways and getting pulled farther and farther from the center. And it feels as if like I'm inside of an octopus and going down these different tentacles. So that's kind of how I depicted it. But, you know, the farther I get from the back to the center, I realize that like once you go down these pathways, you can't get back to where you started. You just have to keep going. And I become afraid because I don't want to lose my kind of anchor to that original place. And as I become afraid, I'm moving faster and faster. And then I somehow take a pathway where I get spit out into what it feels like the waiting room of a theater. And there's all of these other people standing around as if they're waiting to go into the theater. And here I am getting sort of like popped out almost like from an amusement park ride and landing in this vestibule with these other people who are waiting. And they're just looking at me and they're shaking their finger like, tisk, tisk, you came out too soon. You need to go back in and try again.
No
and
kidding.
So I run through and I go right back in down this pathway, like to get right back into the ride, you know, the octopus. And there was so much about this, but to me, it was like a time when I think I was really starting to like believe in reincarnation and having a sort of sense of this interlife realm where we go between lives, and how in our lifetimes I feel that there is a purpose, a mission, or a reason why we're here, a lesson we're supposed to learn, you know, that we come here into this reality world to learn something and do something, I don't know, to fulfill some sort of purpose. And it's like, if you get off track and you don't learn that lesson, you're going to have to try it again. So it kind of felt like I was shirking the lessons I was supposed to be learning by being on a path that wasn't really authentic to me, and that I wasn't really going to get anywhere with that, you know, and it felt like there was an urgent message of like, it's time to get on your real path. And also that something about letting go of the fear.
That's incredible. And this was when you were in New Mexico, kind of in that in-between space, you know, of kind of realizing the previous path wasn't working and you hadn't really found the right next one. Yeah, there's so much to that dream. But I would say that like it also really confirmed my belief in reincarnation. Interesting.
Yeah. And was almost evidence to me, like, yeah, I am intuiting that. So I've always been like, yeah, I think that's what's going on, at least on some level, but that's not the belief system I was raised with. And so it seemed a little bit like kind of like a fantasy, or like something I like to imagine or think about. But I started to realize, and this is a tangent a little bit, but I'm a hypnosis practitioner. And as I've learned more about hypnosis and worked in those realms with trance work and just explored more in those topics, I've started to realize that a lot of things I've been dreaming about throughout my life feel like they map onto that inner life realm between lives. And I can see where that shows up in my dreams and makes sense of my dream.
That's fascinating. I've never thought of that. That makes intuitive sense to me. Like the realm between lives, and the dreams are indicating something about that. Wow. Oh my goodness. I'm going to have to think about that for my upcoming dreams.
And I know a lot of people who dream, I've met a lot of people who dream specifically about what seem like past lives, where they may be even speaking a different language or having very specific storylines where they'll return over and over again to this lifetime and dream it. Like I have a friend who has been dreaming her whole life about World War II, and in the dream she speaks fluent German, and doesn't speak German in her current lifetime. So there's that shows up a lot, actually. Yeah, but I tend to dream more about the spirit realm, like not so much about specific past life. And there's also like dreams where you might have encounters or visitations with people who've passed on. That's very common. I have those kinds of dreams. I also believe we can connect in spirit with other souls who are incarnate in the dream world. Shamans have been doing that forever, going and meeting up in the dream world with people from other, they're shamans from other tribes and kind of collaborating. Or there's many ways that like people I've heard many stories about that. But
now you're tipping me off. This is where you got to make
psychological.
You got to do your podcast then. This is incredible.
I could go in many directions.
Here I am just coming out of Freud and Jung, and it's so very much focused on the unconscious, which I think is a huge component, but just that part is what I'm looking at right now. And it's completely rearranging how I'm seeing dreams. Yeah. He's like, it's not like, oh, we go to sleep and we're happen to be dreaming and we're these animals in the bed. He's like, no, it's its whole unique dimension that we like can kind of shift between.
Yeah.
And then his, Johnson's postulate is the unconscious forces that are flowing through us, the different poles and responsibilities and concerns and tensions and stuff kind of pop out in these dream symbols. And that to me was sort of the more classic understanding of dream work, where those things that we do experience are actually in their more fundamental original state appearing and generating these dreams. And then maybe all these energies somehow can at some point will manifest or surface in the outer world, whether they're already here or not yet here. But so that's basically the thesis of this book. But now you're getting into these whole different realms of, astral travels and past lives. And I love the past life one. This is great.
So
holy moly.
I also will say that I think that what you're talking about is equally true and very important. And I have also noticed a tendency, at times in myself to do be really into the spiritual dreams and kind of shirk the psychological dreams. And so actually, as I've gotten deeper into dream work, I've gotten really feel like it's actually really important to work on my content in this life, the very nitty gritty inner work of this life. And so I think it is really important to work with that psychological content. And also Jung, I feel like Jung was a very multidimensional person too. And he talked about the unconscious in the form of the personal unconscious, the family unconscious, and the collective unconscious, which opens up into, the all that is, like the Akashic field, or I don't think he used that term, but he did talk about communicating with ancestors, working with spirit guides to explore the unconscious. And so he was not, just talking about the personal.
Let me just pause the conversation for a moment to do a quick cutaway about Carl Jung. A lot of us know he was a very prominent psychologist. And as a psychology major, I knew some of the broad strokes, mostly that he was born in Switzerland in 1875 and was known as a younger colleague and friend of Sigmund Freud in the early 1900s until they diverged philosophically and Jung ended up establishing the field of analytic psychology. I mostly knew him as creating or popularizing concepts like individuation, archetypes, and the collective unconscious. But since talking with Carrie, it turns out that his interests were much broader than this. Now that we have his massive collective works, black books written in the teens and 20s, as well as publication of the Red Book in 2009, which was a compendium of notes he made during the 1910s and 20s, we see a wide-ranging interest and intensive investigation of things like mystical visions, spiritualism and seances, unconscious forces, psychic phenomena, alchemy, art therapy, and yes, even UFOs later in his life. Throughout his life, though, dreams were a tentpole topic that he kept coming back to, ranging from his early private correspondence with Freud to a 1912 book, Psychology of the Unconscious, and a book published a year after his death in 1962 called Memories, Dreams, and Reflections. He was like the polymath of psychology and spiritualism and, these numinous realms. All right, let's talk again with Carrie and get back into some dream work.
Jung is an excellent guide to all of this.
He's one of these guys that the more I learn about him, the more I realize I don't know about him. You know, it's coming out of like the Western psych major. It was, he did, analytical psychology and did dream work and explored the collective unconscious. And that was kind of it, but you get into it as the things you're talking about, just all these other facets that aren't really passed forward in the university too much,
Yeah. Well, but I do think that there's kind of a bias to maybe water down some of his spiritual, what I would call, the spiritual aspects of his work. Although he really tried to distance himself from making metaphysical claims, but the fact that most of his work in creating the field of analytical psychology came from his direct encounter with the unconscious and his work with his own dream material and visionary material. When the Red Book, the content of the Red Book was the birthing of a lot of what has now become important psychological theory. And I feel like that's often not mentioned in our, it's but that's where he actually derived a lot of his understanding of the psyche, was his encounter with his own unconscious material, which was very kind of numinous and mystical.
Numinous, that's the word.
Yeah.
Yep.
And pretty non-rational, and involved a lot of work with the dead and the ancestors, and his spirit guide, Bynum, who guided him into the inner realms. And so...
See, that was not in my textbook.
We don't talk about that.
Not too much.
But, I'm sure, I'm not a trained Jungian analyst or anything, but I have an interest in all of that.
Yeah, so that's the shift that's been happening for me just in having been reading this for the last week or two, is even as I read Robert Johnson, he's really talking about letting yourself contact the unconscious. And I used to think of that kind of as neck up, somewhere in here, there's all that, but it's as my kind of spiritual viewpoint continues to mature or progress or change, I've really loosened the and in getting older, I don't feel as riveted as much to this material realm. And so in doing so, it's the primary colors of this world are existing down in this, what is called unconscious, but I agree with you. I don't really like that word. It's there seems like there'd be a better, it's a more anterior part of ourselves, You're hooking directly into that now, rather than having to go through the filter of the kind of logical mind and stuff. As I read this, I feel like I'm going into the ocean of this stuff, which is way more primary and immediate in its own way,
I love that, the metaphor of the ocean. And I often read the ocean in my dreams as the unconscious. And again, I'm just using that word because it's the word that I know to use, but
yeah.
And also that what you're talking about, going down and going into the underworld, the subterranean. And so the inner life might be what you'd call the upper world and the shamanic perspective, but the unconscious would be more like the underworld. And I think there's also a lot of imagery in dreams of subterranean passageways. And so I do think there's a sort of a map that exists of these different realms, and that it's actually through alchemizing our inner experiences, which can be kind of percolating under the surface, and our hidden emotions, our challenges, our unclaimed parts of ourselves that we
there you go,
become more whole. That's the sort of the Jungian perspective, which I love and does map on my experience, and that it's this sort of could be potentially an endless excavation.
Yeah.
But there was something I was going to say about what you Oh yeah. Well, yeah, the directness. I totally agree. And one of my favorite quotes from Freud is that dreams are the royal road to the unconscious.
That's right.
And what I think is so great is that, like, you know, the unconscious is so vast, and so there's so much content that our rational minds and our kind of conscious selves have to have a boundary or a filter, because if those doors were just blast open, we would be very overwhelmed by
That's a good point.
everything, you know, and unable to. And so, like, there's a really important function to, like, our cognitive rational brains or the ego or whatever you want to call it, to be able to organize our experience in a way that we can function in the world and that makes sense and that doesn't overwhelm us. But I really believe dreams give you just the right pieces of information that you are ready to digest and process in any moment. And that there is a sort of, some people would call it the guardian of the unconscious, but there's like a natural filter, and dreams can sort of deliver information in chunks. And then if we work with those bits of information and unpack them, we can learn so much, but it's safe, like safely.
I really appreciate you saying that. I think that's important to remember, because often when we talk about, especially when I was younger, talk about the unconscious, it seemed like this almost scary realm, or it could be, you know, and just the feeling of that. But in shifting the connotation of the unconscious, and even the definition of what I mean by that, is sort of the more anterior realm of more pure energy, rather than like these hidden secrets and skeletons in my closet, you know. It sort of changes the connotation. And also, is what you're saying is, like, we do have this faculty that I guess you'd say protects us, or at least this faculty that's like, we don't have to give up our agency or our, you know, we can steer the ship basically in whatever exploration we want to take.
Exactly.
So that sort of like makes it a lot more approachable.
That's a great metaphor. Yeah. We're not trying to leave behind the conscious self or the ego. We're just trying to build a relationship and, like, open to more expansive.
There you go. Build a relationship. I love that. That's good.
I actually had written a note, like, to talk about that, the fear of the unconscious, which I think is a primal human fear of the unknown, of death, of everything that isn't conscious and part of our known reality. And so I think that's a very sort of healthy, normal fear. And it shouldn't be one that holds us back from these explorations, but it might be more of something to work with and work through. And that also sometimes lets us know, and, like, okay, you need to pause here and integrate that before you take the next step, you know? And so I think there's some natural protectors that we have that will kind of help us pace ourselves in the work, you know, which is, there's a lot of thinking around that in the therapy realm. Yeah, I think the fear of the unconscious is a primal fear. And also, our culture has loaded on kind of extra fear.
Good point.
There that isn't maybe necessary, because the unconscious, I believe, is our friend and it wants to help us. And of course, it's a vast realm. So I'm not saying everything in there is always benevolent, but I think essentially, like, our inner being wants us to become whole, wants us to heal, has a natural impulse towards growth and towards expansion and, you know, more integrated understanding of ourselves. And so going into Dreamwork with the attitude that dreams are here to help us, I think is a very helpful assumption to make, because I believe they are. And Jeremy Taylor, again, said one of his quotes is that all dreams come in service of healing and wholeness. Even the nightmares, you know, even the things that, like, feel dark and scary are trying to help us process something. And there's often a lot of resources in there. when we actually go and work with that dream, there's actually often a pathway forward that moves us to healing.
That's a great double point, between the normal feeling to feel that way, but the cultural overlay as well. Because when you were talking about how other cultures have a very normalized way of sharing or exchanging dreams, just sort of feeling into that, it was like, oh, that's kind of nice. Like, it's not a big deal,
Yeah.
It is in the sense that it's important, but in the sense that like you're not having social shunning or anything like that to want to be interested or to want to go there.
Right.
And I guess that's part of why I wanted to talk with you too, is just to try to normalize it, put our little piece into normalizing this a little bit. So. California dreaming, I'll touch a winter's dream. Dream, dream, dream. Dream on, dream on, dream on. Dream it up, sweet dreams are made of these. It's all of me who wants to.
I have such like curiosity about the nature of reality and other dimensions. And so I just kind of dive right into that stuff. But that's not for everybody, and you can work with your dreams and just work with symbolic imagery and learn so much about yourself and your daily life experience and how to grow and really becoming more authentic, versions of ourselves. I just love it because I feel like there's so many different choices of how to engage and really finding the pathway that works for us, each person. And like, for some people, it might be a lot more like taking a small bite, and,
Yep.
and then, I like to take kind of big bites, but that's me.
It's true.
But I don't expect everybody else to want to do that, but this is my lifetime fascination. So like, I feel like it's what I'm here to do, but,
I like to hear you say that. So yeah, like bringing it in from my fairly recent coaching training, if we're at a certain place and we want to move it toward, dream work or any kind of developmental movement, what does it mean to move just a little bit in that direction? So for me, I'm basically coming out of probably where most people would be, which is I have a dream and sometimes I wake up and maybe remember it, but then by morning, maybe I've mostly forgotten it.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe, I'll wake up and go, oh, that was interesting. And then kind of just, that's it. And I get on with my day.
Mm-hmm.
But there's the occasional ones that are very powerful and eject me out. So that's one aspect. Coming out of that in the coaching is like, well, what would a little bit more look like? I don't really do this very much. So like, what would be kind of some doors to open or some things that might be
good
nice?
Question. We can bring it down to more like simpler, practical steps. I would say the first thing to do is keep a dream journal if you're not doing that already. And what I recommend there is to like have the dream journal beside your bed and write something down as soon as you wake up. Even if you don't remember the whole dream, often if you just start writing, more will come. Like it'll jog your memory, and it also it's training that relationship between the unconscious and conscious mind to be like, I'm paying attention, I'm listening, I want to hear. And so you're going to kind of build the consistency around the dream recall. And then once you have, and also I suggest, and most people say, like, write your dreams in present tense, like I'm walking out in a field, and describe all the details of that you remember. You can jot down associations or feelings, just anything that comes to you. Or even if it's just one image, it's incredible what you can get out of just a single image. You could do a whole Dreamwork session on that. So don't worry if you don't remember it all. Just write down whatever you remember. Doing that will build the muscle of the dream recall. And then you can take any of those dreams and do like a little more work on them. like with the Robert Johnson book, I think he suggests simple techniques that you could even do in your journal, like free association on images is really good. Just free associating on like, what's a car?
I'll give you one. I had a dream just a couple nights ago. I was just driving in a dream. It was a very short dream, but it was very powerful. And all I knew, I couldn't see where I was going. It was like fog, but it was night and it was really, really dark, like just on the verge of totally not being able to see. But I knew there was like a giant like tractor trailer out there somewhere that I needed to like not run into. Almost like a whale, in the darkness. I saw this like tractor trailer kind of drive by and its headlights were kind of vaguely lighting up the fog in front of it. And that was like the extent of the dream. Starting to associate it though, I'm like, okay, something's powerful, right? Mm-hmm. Something's in the darkness that's like, it wasn't exactly threatening, but it was kind of like awesome in the sense of awe, it was, there's something like, oh wow, there's this big awesome thing out there, and so it felt to me like almost connected with the maybe this medicine journey. It's like there's some new powerful force that's waking up maybe within me or that I haven't connected with yet fully, but it sort of scares me, but it's sort of attractive at the same time. So that's as far as I got with that. But I haven't done all the associations with that truck yet. But I mean, you could take it in any number of directions, It's carrying something. There you go. It's carrying something important.
Carrying something. Exactly. Yeah. It's not just a truck, it's a tractor trailer. It has that. So like, getting specific about those images, like you said, it's carrying something. So it just in that little dream snippet, there's all these symbols, like there's driving, there's fog, there's night, there's tractor trailer, there's darkness, there's headlights. So just taking a moment with each of those elements and associating, what does it remind me of? What does it bring up? To get you, like you've already been doing, like you've already gotten so much out of that just with like, just looking at the tractor trailer.
Well, it's interesting. The value of just telling you this made me recognize that it's carrying something. And I feel like it was a tanker truck. So it was like fuel, there's something.
Yeah, it's carrying, exactly, a tanker truck carrying fuel. And like, see, that's also happens when you write something down. You might not have realized it was a tanker truck until you started to jog your memory and think it feels like it's a tanker truck. And sometimes you don't even remember that, but there's a part of you that kind of senses it.
Yeah. And so like we're illustrating the difference between, 2 weeks ago before I was really getting into this, I probably would have like, oh, that was an interesting dream. And then like not done anything else with it, It's a great dream. But, it was so short and it wasn't too emotionally charged, So I probably would have just let it slide. But you start to work with it. And actually Johnson's like any dream has value. None of them are going to go to waste if you want to work 100%. With it. So like just doing that is like, oh, I see. Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I feel like there's so much potential in that dream. And like you said, every dream has value. Sometimes dreams that we might think are trivial, when we actually go in there and do the work on them, are profound. That's what I found. But I mean, if it's helpful, I don't want to kind of try to analyze too much into that in this context, but I could give you some suggestions for some things you might try when you're working with that dream, just to maybe illustrate an example of how you might work with the dream on your own.
Sure.
So we've already talked about the free associations, and you've already gotten a whole lot out of that. And like you said, taking each of those symbols and really fleshing that out, like, it's a truck. Well, what kind of truck? What size of truck? What's the function of that truck? Asking.
I got one for you. I just had another detail. It was turning. I remember it was like coming and then turning. Yeah.
Yeah. So what might it mean to you that it's turning?
That's such a small detail, it would seem, right? But it could have just been going straight the whole time. It could have been stopped there and not moving, But it was moving and it was turning, which means like, despite the fog, it was finding its way. It knew where it was going. Oh, man. Wow. Even though I didn't, as the subject in the dream, I was like, where? Like, I don't know where I am, but the truck knew, it needed to turn here,
Were you driving the truck?
No, I was trying to navigate my, I guess, car or something just on these back roads or something. Yeah, but I came across that truck.
Right. It's so despite the fog, it knows where it's going.
Uh-huh.
And it's turning instead of going straight. So like, yeah, thinking about what's the difference between turning and going straight.
It's finding a new path.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing.
I love it. I'm getting chills.
It's like a fun surge of energy. When you make the connection, you can feel it in your body. Your body's like, recognize it. It's like a water spring suddenly turns on or something. It's like, oh yeah, and like something just opened, so that's a way to recognize what's the legit kind of hit.
Right. Like a water spring suddenly turn on. And Jeremy Taylor, for one, and other dream workers talk about that as like the aha moment. And the aha moment is what tells you when you've hit something, like, because I could say something about that truck and like, for me, a truck might mean this, and you might not have that aha moment. But when you said it's carrying something and it's turning and it's finding a new path, there's the somatic sensation, a felt sense of resonance. And that's what tells you you're on the right track.
Interesting. Because the logic is like, it's a foggy day and I can't see where I'm going. You know what I mean? But absolutely. No, that's, yeah. And you get I had a sense this is like a significant symbolic dream, But then when you like make that click, it's like, oh yeah, that's cool.
Well, I would even say that your choice to share the dream in this moment, in this conversation, is part of the dream now. And it's part of that, now this is part of the dream.
Oh my goodness.
The dream is connected to this moment in time. And it's very interesting how dreams will come up or would choose, like if you go to a dream group and you quote unquote randomly choose a specific dream, it's always the right dream.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. Because our unconscious chooses it.
That's right.
And so there's so much going on under the surface that our rational minds miss.
Holy smokes. I'm going to have to pause. No, that's good. Thank you.
It's just amazing. I don't want to rush through it. And I feel like there's so much more here, but I also want to honor your process with the dream. It might be interesting to experiment with, like, what if I shift my perspective from the driver's seat of the car to the driver's seat of the truck? How does that change my experience of that dream?
I will do that. I will do that exercise. Yeah, that's good.
And you can actually shift your perspective into any element of the dream. You can become the fog. You can become the night. You can become the headlights.
That's huge. That's huge. Because that tracks with the book. It's like each of these pieces is already representing a part of our own energetic fields.
Yes.
So you could, of course, invoke those and kind of go into them, and
yes, and
flesh them out.
It's amazing how things look different when you step into a different element or perspective. And part of the ego in our lives is like it's almost like we're locked into one perspective. But we're always seeing through the glasses of our own ego. And so, and I use that word lightly, like we could talk a lot about like, what is the ego, but just our kind of functional personhood that we're walking about in the world with. But we would see the world so differently from the perspective of another person's experience. And so in our dreams, you can do the same thing. There's like a dream ego. There's a perspective in the dream. We might be seeing the dream from the perspective of the driver of the car in this case. We might be seeing the dream from outside and just watching it as an observer. So noticing where your perspective's coming from in the dream and then playing around with switching it because it's our dream and we get to work with it in whatever way we want. It's absolutely incredible how different and how much it unlocks new perspectives when we shift our point of view. And so dreams give us the opportunity to play with that in really cool ways. And I think Robert Johnson kind of suggests some of that stuff in the book, if I remember right.
Any of these symbols already contain their meaning because like they're there, they've already been generated. So it's like once you touch them, then the meaning can, you can go right into that meaning. They wouldn't be in the dream if it hadn't already generated,
And like you're already discovering, the meaning unfolds. There's one layer and then you sit with it and there's another layer. And then, oh my goodness, the truck is turning and now there's another layer. But it doesn't really happen until we like actually step into that image and really start engaging with it.
This is energy work. It is dream work. It's related to energy work as well. Because like I feel even when I made that connection with the truck, I feel there's somatic or energetic things I could do to sort of move energies around that would sort of maybe drive the truck forward, let's say, or something like that, that just feels like it is something is already shifting. That's what the dream's representing, right? And so when you start to recognize that, then they become conscious. And then because they're conscious, you can kind of work with them a little bit more in other modalities, That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is energy work. I agree 100%. And that's a really powerful insight. Something I want to share along those lines is, and I want to be like also aware of giving credit to the different sources that I've learned from many sources. And one of them, Dr. Leslie Ellis, who I did a dreamwork training with, her approach called embodied experiential dreamwork involves going into the dream somatically and imagining and working with our somatic sensations to kind of re-enter the dream. And there's other approaches that do something similar, but she has a really, I feel like, well-developed kind of way to guide that and to teach that. She uses a tool called focusing, which is a somatic inquiry tool, which I could also talk more about. But anyway, it just really reminds me of what you just described, of actually tuning into the body sensations that come when we enter that dream and even enter it imaginally. And then we can actually kind of play with and reimagine the dream following the energy and seeing where that energy wants to shift and wants to go. And a lot of times through entering into the dream, which you could call it maybe a metaphor, is one way of thinking about a dream. You shift the metaphor and you shift the energy of everything that's contained in that metaphor.
Wow.
And so you're allowing yourself a pathway to some change, to some evolution where an energy might be kind of constellated in a certain way, and then it can gently start to move. And it's a beautiful thing to work through the metaphorical language, because sometimes we don't even have to talk about the waking life thing that might correlate to it. We don't even necessarily have to name that to feel that shift. And sometimes it's easier to work with too on that level. It's like it's more accessible.
That makes sense to me. The waking life will follow, as it needs to from energy shifting.
I don't no longer really see my dreams as individualized units, like this dream and that dream. I see that they're like all nodes in this landscape of sort of the imaginal realm, and so I could just imaginally go into one dream and then jump into another one, and then suddenly they're connected, and then it's sort of like it is a playground in a realm of infinite possibility and pathways and interconnectedness, and we might be actually like shifting things around in our neural networks as we work through this imaginal landscape. A playground is a really good word. The element of play is, to me, like really important in this work. Because it can feel heavy at times, but it can also be fun and light and expansive. It's both.
That's one of my missions right now. Lighten up a little bit. I like to go serious and intense. Let's get into it, Absolutely.
Oh, and
absolutely.
Dreams have a great sense of humor too. they use puns a lot. There's a lot of puns in dreams. And I can tell you about one example that I think is very funny.
Okay.
If you'd like.
Yeah. I'd love to hear it. Very punny.
And I could just keep talking, so feel free to interrupt me anytime. But as you know, Alex and I, my husband, inherited his mother's house and all of her belongings. And she had a lot of belongings and a lot of old ancestral furniture and pictures and just lots and lots of stuff that feels like it has a lot of energy and attached to it and not easy stuff to necessarily get rid of willy-nilly. And I went through a long period of time feeling very burdened and overwhelmed and kind of victimized by all this stuff that I was trying to process through, which is kind of metaphorical, But I had this dream that at first seemed very kind of, and this also is an example of how sometimes dreams can be very visceral and dark and intense, but then when we unpack them on the level of the metaphor, they're no longer as threatening. So anyway, I'm kind of going into this pond of dark black muck. And I'm walking in and I feel fine. It's it's okay. I can do this. But as I get deeper and deeper in, it gets all the way up to my neck. And then I start to feel like I'm going to drown in this muck, and it's really gross. And then I look around and there's all these skeletons of albatrosses in the muck. And I'm that's weird. And, my unconscious mind somehow knows these are albatrosses. And so I wake up feeling very suffocated and overwhelmed by this. And there's bones of dead things and,
oh, goodness.
Pretty visceral. But when I did the work on the dream, I was able sort of to pull myself out of the muck and dry myself off and sit in the sun. And then I told the dream to Alex and he said, "Oh, it's an albatross around your neck," which is and I was "What's that?" And it's yeah, it's an annoying burden. It's not going to kill you. You're not going to drown. It's an annoying burden, but it's kind of funny and you'll get through it. And I swear, ever since I had that dream, I've had a much lighter relationship with all this stuff. I have my dramatic feelings about the stuff really shifted to being I can handle this.
Wow.
Isn't that cool? And it's almost like my dream self was making fun of me a little bit for being so serious and dramatic about the situation. That, maybe I don't need to relate to it in such a heavy way.
Interesting. It's like the pun was part of the energy shift. That's incredible.
Yes. Because I didn't see the pun. He had to point it out to me and I didn't even recognize it. So there's that intelligence that's this storytelling, humor, playfulness.
You never know. Given that in your conscious logical mind, you didn't recognize the albatross around your neck, but somehow your dream self knew that, or maybe it knew that Alex would know that, and
yes,
that's too funny.
Yeah. And sometimes your dreams will present allusions to things or names and you're what is, or places. And it'll be things I don't know about consciously, but I'll go look it up and it'll be incredibly symbolic.
Yeah.
So there's some other greater intelligence at work that I feel speaks to through the dream. Yeah. So I like that too. If stuff specific images, research them. If a certain animal shows up, what is that animal? Exploring more about that animal and what it means in different cultures, or what are some of its qualities, and you might learn something that really clicks. So there's just, so many different ways to go in. But
yeah, and that's another takeaway of mine is that with the collective unconscious, I thought that all these symbols could be, are they universal or are they personal? And I realized you can kind of look at both directions. Definitely you want to know the personal associations, what's the meaning of a big 18-wheeler truck, but so pulling that out of myself, but then, maybe not the truck, but, things like driving, or there could be more universal kind of understandings that could also give us some insight.
Yes. Yeah. I think that That's right on. There are universal elements and personal elements, and it's valuable to look at both. But when you only look at the universal elements, sometimes you're missing the personal meaning, So not just like, a car, for example. A car is such a classic archetypal symbol of like movement forward, driving, where am I going? Control, like who's at the driver's seat? Like there's all these things about a car, but then there's also which car and what color and what size and what does that car mean to you in your life? And I recently dreamed about the car that I had, my first car that I had when I was in high school. And like that car only means what it means to me. So, and it's a car. So it also means that. So it's both. I think it's always both.
Having gone so much into the kind of unconscious inner work side of things, but I started to realize for myself, I feel like his emphasis is like rule of thumb, most of the characters and situations in your dream are reflections of parts of yourself, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm like, I've had like other kinds of dreams, there's like recurring dreams, which would be unconscious. There's the ones you mentioned with like ancestral visitation. There's visionary message dreams that throw me out of the dream and I wake up immediately and like, holy crap, what was that, And so I was curious your experience with like these different forms of dreams. And
well, it's really cool that you're like noticing that. I mean, that's something that I think about a lot, and I started to notice it more and more as I work with dreams. Like they're not all the same type,
Right.
And so I think when you're working with a quote unquote psychological dream, your dreams will sort of cast characters from your life who maybe represent different parts of yourself, different aspects of your, my high school or my, you on one level, you can say that everything is a part of me and it's a useful framing. And in kind of like a gestalt way that we can kind of interact with these different parts. And I do think often characters in our dreams can play parts of ourselves. And there's also elements that are kind of external to ourselves in a way that show up in dreams. And metaphysically speaking, you could say, well, if we're all part of one consciousness, then yes, those are all mirrors of myself and parts of myself. So on that level, I would say, yeah, any kind of dream you could look at that way. But I do believe, like you're saying, there are very archetypal energies that show up in my dreams, which in a way, yeah, that's a part of myself, but in a way that's also something greater. It's transpersonal, And then, like you said, visitations from ancestors, from
past life, as you say.
I 100% believe that. I can't tell you what the ultimate reality of that is, but we can have communication with people who've passed on. And I think it happens routinely for a lot of us. And I really want to normalize that. And I know I can feel it. Like if I've had an encounter in a dream with somebody, you start to feel like, was that an encounter with another soul? Or was that a person playing a part in a play?
Right. Right.
I've had encounters where I've, had a really meaningful conversation with a friend I haven't talked to in a long time. And it really feels like we met on a soul level in the dream world. And that's how I take it. I take it literally in that way. And the past lives, where I might be like remote viewing a situation from another time and place. And so like, I don't think that every dream is meant to be read psychologically necessarily, or I don't know, meant to, but like, that's not the only way to view a dream. And I think it is good to start to sort of categorize in your own dream life, like what the flavors of different kinds of dreams are. And you might work with different dreams in different ways. Huh. So like this dream of the octopus, this felt like sort of an archetypal soul level dream. And there's, obviously psychological elements too, but like I would work with that dream in a different way than I might work with a dream of I'm anxious because I didn't get to class on time. Like, classic. Although, I mean, I could actually, as I say that, like I could actually see how that could actually be pretty related.
True, actually. Yeah, true.
I think just playing around with different approaches really helps you to sort of build your own dream language. I think that there are dreams I would approach as very much like sacred experiences.
That's right. That was a phenomenal conversation, and I could do like
thank
10
you.
of these. Yeah. No, thank you. It's a gift to me for you to share this big part of you, you know. Can people contact you? Do you have a way of that, or they can run through me if you prefer that?
Yeah, I offer Dreamwork sessions and kind of integrative coaching, which is just multiple modalities like hypnotherapy, dreamwork, and somatic work, various kind of energy work. Just I incorporate tools from different modalities. I have a website called innerlandscapeshealing.com.
Innerlandscapehealing.com.
Inner landscapes, plural.
Scapes. Okay.
Yeah. And that has all my services and way to contact me.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'd love to talk to you more about dreams or your dreams or, you know, off the recording. So.
Sure. Understandable.
If you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll set up a time. Yeah. Invaluable. Thank you, Carrie.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for listening and for inviting me.
You know
and
it.
Yeah, allowing me to share.
All right. Till next time, Carrie.
Bye. Be well.
Thank you all for listening. And I encourage you, as Carrie said, to keep a dream journal by your bed. And if you want to get a little more into it, you can check out some of the resources or books listed down in the show notes. Until next time, pleasant dreams.